I'm not a doodler. I draw, but I don't doodle. I don't know. I mean, it's cute what they do, what we do, but. He was my golden child. So I decided to do an iris with him sitting in the center, and he will become, it will be all the golden, he will be the golden child there, and it'll have the little gold circles that simulate the pollen and stuff on the flower.
She always called me her golden child when I was a kid, and it was because, you know, I showed up on her doorstep when I was 3.5 years old, and my like golden blonde hair, she said, was shining in the sunlight, and she just always called me her golden child. She always treated me like that too.
One thing is because when he was standing there in the sun, he just looked all golden. But the other thing is he's an old soul. You've heard the saying, an old soul in a young body.
Yes.
He was that when he was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. He was just, he seemed to look at the world with such a caring heart. And in my childhood, when I grew up, the kids were very mean, and I never met anybody like him.
I remember walking into her house and just seeing all these paintings all over the walls, and I'd never seen anything like that in my life. You know, our house had white walls and very minimal artwork, just posters or maybe whatever, but it was literally floor to ceiling, vibrant, intense, colorful paintings, and I just remember it was kind of like being transported to Oz, and I just would go and stare at one and then stare at the next and ask her about them, and that just kind of like burned an impression into my memory, and I knew that this was a place that I wanted to be.
When he walked in, his eyes just got really, he had blue eyes and they just got gigantic. And he walked over to a painting and he looked at it and he just stared at it. And then he turned around and he looked at me and he smiled. And I thought, that's unusual.
I loved, you know, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I had a particular fascination with the movie Mary Poppins, I think right around that time. In fact, this was one of the very first little paintings I made in Linda's class. I was 4 when I started doing oil.
A little bit higher.
Up here?
Yeah, there.
So this is one of the very first paintings I made of Mary Poppins. You know, pretty crude, but she was...
How old were you?
4.
You made that painting when you were 4 years old?
Mm-hmm. I did.
But as he grew, he was so mature for his age in body and mind. By the time he was in the 5th grade, he was almost the height he is now. He had even started to grow a little beard, and the kids were just so mean to him. And of course, he got straight A's, and so they called him Little Professor. And they teased him and they'd trip him and they would do all these things. And he had such a kind heart that he never fought back. He would just go back during recess and lunch. He only did what he had to do. Then he would go back behind the school and sit on the steps, fire escape steps. And that's where he would draw or read.
By 11 or 12 was when I started to understand some of the, you know, deeper symbolism in Linda's paintings, and that was also around the same time when I started to experience a lot of bullying myself at school, and so the two things kind of went hand in hand in my brain, and I realized that this, you know, could maybe be a way for me to, you know, say something more meaningful with my artwork too.
When he was about 12, we were sitting in the studio and he just sort of started to cry. And I said, he was asking me about my childhood and had I been happy and all this. And I told him a little bit, but I didn't tell him a lot. And he just started to cry. And I said, why are you crying? And he said, the kids are so mean to me. He said, I'm kind to them, but they're just so mean. And I said, why? And he told me about he would go back behind the school and sit and you know, try to ignore them and whatever. And so from that, I said, now, Paul, why don't you take that situation and make a painting? And he said, well, I don't know how. And I says, well, how do you feel? And he says, I just feel like I don't fit in this world.
Everyone else in my class seemed like, you know, they were just these cookie cutter, you know, symbols of perfect little kids, and that they played football or they were cheerleaders, and everyone listened to the right music and wore the right clothes, and I didn't belong in that world. So that was the first painting that I did that was kind of telling my story, and it's called The Piece That Doesn't Fit. So I would actually sit, at first, I would sit on the steps outside of my school during recess, because my least favorite time of the day was whenever we were unsupervised. That was when, you know, the kids were the worst. So I would go around the side of the school and sit on the steps while everyone else played, and I would read or draw or something.
I remember one day he came to me and he says, Linda, I have to tell you something. Now don't be sad. And I says, what's that, Paul? He said, see the fingers on my hand? 5. I thought about killing myself 5 times, and I thought of you, and I didn't do it.
This is one of hers that we have, and we take around to some of our You Will Rise events. And this is about, you know, her childhood home and the brokenness of it. And you know, it's dark. It has, you know, pretty colors and everything. But as I would look at a piece like this and really start to kind of try and understand the story that it was telling, I realized that, you know, there's a lot going on here, and it was about her father and the abuse and the way the shadows of that follow her around, and so it tells a lot without using any words.
And I always thought, well, if I was prettier, if I was smarter, if I worked hard, if I minded and didn't, you know, did what I was supposed to do, people would like me, or people would love me. And I can remember thinking, I don't know what it was after a bad episode of violence with my father. I remember saying that in my head, if I was just a better person, he would love me and not hurt me. And then I sort of had like a light bulb come on in my head, and I thought, there's nothing wrong with me, there's something wrong with him. And there's something wrong with my mother, that she couldn't love me. And there's something wrong with those kids, that they bully me. And from that day on, I could handle what went on. I didn't hide anymore.
And put her in sort of a mountain setting to reflect, you know, the background where a lot of the difficult stuff from her past occurred, and what she has spent sort of her life overcoming and triumphing over. And that was what her war paint piece is really about.
I know he just did one of me, a war paint one. I think he thinks I'm a warrior or something, which is it's neat that he thinks that.
Yeah, she is. I mean, she, you know, I've known her so long, and I've always sort of looked up to her, but throughout that whole time, I can always remember just thinking that she was tough, that she was someone who could kind of overcome anything, and that was what I kind of wanted to be too. That was one of the things I really admired about her. And the fact that her art was not about making pretty pictures, but it was actually about dealing with some of these really dark, scary things that she had gone through.
And love is what has brought us here. With the courage to come near. Chase away.
Bullying affects kids, every kid in a different way. Some can handle it, some can just laugh it off. Others, they just take it to heart and it becomes who they are. If someone treats them like trash, they begin to treat themselves like trash. And a lot of our kids they're cutters. They've tried to kill themselves.
And love is what has brought us here. With the courage to come near, chase away our pride and our fear. With the light to carry it, with the light to...
You know, I was bullied pretty severely, and it was traumatic for me, but it was before the internet, so I knew that at 2:30 it was over until the next day. But so many young people now are bullied from the time they wake up until they go to bed, and it never stops, and they can't find a way out. So we just wanted to give them a space where they were safe and where they could be creative, and it's really opened up a lot of incredible opportunities for us and for everyone involved.
Up so high, I can see your dark clouds fade away. I can see your dark clouds fade away, darling. 'Cause love is what has brought us here. With the courage to come here. Chase away our pride and our fear. With the light to carry, with the light to carry on. Chase away our pride and our fear. With the light to carry, with the light to carry on.